Welcome to Out of My Mouth, the program where raw thoughts meet unfiltered conversations.
Join us as we dive into the depths of human experience, where we share stories, perspectives, and insights that just might challenge the status quo.
Get ready to laugh, cry, and ponder the world around you like never before. This is Out of My Mouth.
The views and opinions of our guest and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of New Thought Media Network, or any organization we may be affiliated with. Here at New Thought Media Network, we welcome freedom of speech and courageous conversations. There are many topics that can be difficult to navigate. Challenging the status quo and engaging in lively debate is important to expanding our understanding of one another, and life in general. Creating a peaceful world doesn't happen because no one disagrees, it happens from a willingness to understanding one another. In our programming, we strive to expand consciousness and assist people in creating remarkable lives. Your comments are welcome at info@ntmedia.org.
Good afternoon and welcome to Out of My Mouth. I'm Barbara Jean.
And I'm Marg Dupuis. Welcome.
And we are so excited that you're joining us today. Let us start with the land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation and peace, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet on these lands, sacred lands, and we thank the generations of people who've taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. Miigwech. And Marg.
Yes, it's my honor, privilege to introduce my bestie, Dr. Laura Quirk. Come on down, Laura. Laura is currently a full-time professor at the Conestoga College. She has been teaching at the university level since 1996. She has an undergraduate degree in archaeology, a master's in anthropology, a master's in history, and a PhD in history with a minor in archaeology. Before she was a professor, she was on a disability pension for 17 years due to multiple sclerosis. And it was during that time, if you can believe it or not, that she managed to get her degrees. Before that, she owned an art gallery. Today, Laura's here to talk about resilience, something she knows just a little bit about.
Just a little. Welcome, Dr. Laura. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I do know a lot about resilience, but I'm so keen for us to talk about it. And do you want me to just say where it started from? Yeah. Interestingly, people have always said, "Oh, Laura, you're so strong. You're so strong. You're so strong." And, yes, I am. And, for years and years and years, though, I was strong because I had to be strong. But I wasn't also vulnerable. And as I've gotten older and worked through a lot of things, I think that I've realized what strength lies in strength is the ability to be weak and to be not strong all the time. And sometimes what that means is fighting back with this thing called resilience, this thing about bouncing back, finding a way. And, so although I'm strong, and when I haven't been strong, I think it's important that I say I'm not strong. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm not resilient. It doesn't mean I'm not finding a way to fight back and bounce back. And so when I started thinking about it, I love this story, Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I mean, the poor guy has the worst day of his life. He talks about it. He even has to eat lima beans for supper, which frankly I love, but I could appreciate a kiddo wouldn't. And, but he gets gum in his hair and all these things. and he has this terrible day. But ultimately, for his story, why I think it's really interesting is he realizes that he wakes up the next day and he starts over. That he has this resilience to say, okay, I have this terrible, terrible, terrible day, but that was yesterday. And today I'm finding a way to go, okay, new day here. And so I just love his little story because he has this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. How many of us have had those? And then we say to ourselves, right, how do we bounce back? How do we find another way to move forward? And so I just thought that was the sweet and also, right, quite honestly, a good way to talk about what resilience is to me, is that idea of bouncing back. It doesn't mean that you aren't having a hard time. It doesn't mean you're ignoring it. It doesn't mean that this is about saying, oh, well, everything's fine, because it isn't fine. But at the same time, maybe find a way to say, right, so how can I turn that over and say, okay, I can do this. I can do this in spite of what I'm going through, or in addition to what I'm going through, and with what I'm going through. So I think resilience is a really interesting word. And I don't know about you, but when I look at the word resilience and I see it on the screen, I always see the word silence in there. I know it's not quite in there, but for me, resilience is a internal, quiet, sometimes noisy, but mostly quiet experience. And so when I see the word resilience, I like it because I like the idea of saying, okay, it's in me, the ability to do this.
Yes.
And it's something that I have to find within me. And so sometimes that idea of this deep silence works really well. So when it's re-silenced, then I can get noisy again. Then I can, forget the silence. I'm going to, you've done the silence, I'm re-silencing myself. And now I'm going to get it out there and say what I need to say. And so I think resilience is about finding a way to bounce back. So that's what I want to say to start this conversation.
In your write-up, Laura, it says when hope is all you have left.
Yes.
And you're talking about resilience. Do you marry the two together? Or are they separate? And how the heck do you find hope?
So such good question. So for me, I don't know how you find hope. I want to be clear that I have no magic answers here. But what I will say, and I know I've said this to you in the past, but I'll say it this way, is so having MS, when I was first diagnosed, my mother had it. And I just thought, oh my God, it was a nightmare for me to think that I was going to be just like her. I remember in my darkest place, I remember imagining myself in this deep, dark pit. And when I looked up, I couldn't see any light. But the thing was, I knew it was there. And so for me, that in spite of this deep place that I was honestly suicidal in, I still knew that somewhere there was hope. And I'm not saying it was God or religion. I think it was just this idea that I could be okay. And so, I don't know, in answer to your question, Mark, where hope comes from, but I did bring, interestingly enough, I didn't expect you to ask me this, but I was thinking about the very end of my, so I wrote the first chapter of the Hope Project, as I call it, and told my story. And I was trying to talk about what hope is. And so in answer to your question, I did combine hope and resilience. So I want to just read to you 2 sentences. This is almost the end of my OER, and Open Education Resource, the book I wrote. I said, hope isn't about being blind to the world or about being uninterested in how we got here. Rather, it's about a hope that is hard won and that drives us forwards against all odds. It is about resilience, no matter the cost. And it's about looking for light when hope is all you have left. So that, and I really think, so it is about resilience, no matter the cost. And the thing that I really find interesting about the topic and why I want to talk about it today is this whole idea that we're not born with resilience or not with resilience. It is a thing that we can work on, that we can find ways to push through. And so that is why, hope, I can't tell you, my dear, I can't tell you where I get hope from, but I can tell you that resilience comes from my toes. It comes from somewhere deep inside. And that place that I said, re-silence, that place of silence, and just deep inside of me. And I have to reach in and find it. And no one else can do that for me. And I think, though, it is unlike other things that it isn't, you have it or you don't. I think it is something you can cultivate. And again, that's really why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it is something we cultivate. We choose to. So I'm not sure that I didn't answer your question, my friend, but
No, that was good. That was really good. And I love the idea of, choosing. We have choices that we make. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about responsibility. When we can, choose to be responsible for every aspect of our life, then the idea of resilience, it makes perfect sense because it does come from inside of me. And so, but I can't be blaming Marg for my life and expect resilience to show up, because it won't. I have to go, you know what, this is my life. Now what? Now what am I going to do? And I have a choice to make. I can live in the pit, or I can find a way to rise up. And I've had many opportunities, not quite as extreme as yours, I don't think, but many opportunities to find that resilience and put it to work. So thank you. I love that. But yeah, I've got to be responsible for me.
Okay, I got to share me, right? And so when you're saying cultivating resilience, what do you use sometimes to fertilize something you want to cultivate? So going through a lot of shit, right? So using that to cultivate, I know. I just had to throw that in there because it came to me.
thank you there. I do think cultivation is a really good word here, because what does that happen? In order to cultivate, you had to plant seeds first. You had to water the seeds. You had to look after them. You had to weed around them. You had to harvest them, in order to cultivate them. And so I suppose, yeah, it's a really good way to look at it, because in order to do that, you have to have worked through all your stuff. You have to have found a way to harvest, to plant, to do all the things necessary in order to get to that final place. So yeah, I love that idea of cultivation, because we can't find resilience if we haven't done the work. But I think that's interesting is people get afraid of doing the work with resilience. And I think one of the things I think is important is to say, look at, there's ways you can do it. There's steps you can take. And not the least of which is to name and label whatever it is that's going on with you before trying to, you could say, well, gosh, I'm upset. Yeah. Upset about what? And what, and rightly so, but what are you upset about? And so I don't know. I think we have to start with labeling. We have to be honest. We have to ask questions. We have to be patient with ourselves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's one of the things I actually brought it again with me, because speaking of being patient with ourselves, I am a huge fan of Rainer Maria Rilke. I call him Rilke. I'm sure you all do. And one of the things he wrote is about patience. And he said, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked doors and rooms, and like books that are now written in very foreign tongues. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. And perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So if we live the questions, we will live the answers. And so I think for me, again, this was just from a beautiful way of talking about resilience, and talking about planting those seeds. So responding to what you just said made me think of that.
I love that. I love that. The idea of living every day and every experience, I think, is such an important part of what we do and how we do it. If we can be present with what is, I think then we can find our way through.
Yeah.
It's when we try to avoid what's going on or pretend it's not going on. You talked earlier, I think prior to the show, about vulnerability, or maybe right at the beginning. And the idea of being vulnerable is a really important part.
Right. Well, you can't be strong, and you can be strong, but I think to truly understand one side, we have to know the other. And so to be strong, we have to be vulnerable. Yeah, interesting. Something you just said, Barbara. Last week in class, I was telling my story to, I teach this course, for those who don't know, called Why Normal Sucks. And it's a part of a disability minor, and I'm teaching it right now. And I had a student, I told my story, and my student said to me, well, Laura, how did you overcome MS? And I looked at the student and I said, I didn't overcome it. It just is. It just is. And what was interesting was my students wrote a reflection on things that they learned. And almost every one of them, of all the things I said, talked about that they hadn't thought about something just is. That they, and you just sort of said that, Barbara. Like, I think, it just is. I can fight all I want against it. I can rail, I can rant, which sometimes I've done, don't get me wrong.
Oh,
and then I was like, but it just is. And, I can fight it all I want, but it just is. So yeah, I think that's an important piece as well with resilience, is to not fight, is to say, yes, I can grow. Yes, I can work towards it, but also change happens. It just is. It just
is. And what is will change.
Yeah. Nothing ever stays the same.
Nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
And whatever you resist persists.
Yeah, well, that's true as well, for sure. It absolutely does. And I always think whatever I fight against comes back to bite me in the butt. It always does. It just, if I think, well, that's done. I've slammed that door. Whoop, boom. And actually a better way to describe it is I often say I shove it under the carpet so much that eventually I trip over the carpet and fall flat on my face because I just can't ignore it anymore. It's there, like it or not. And so, yes, I often think of that darn carpet. But at the same time, again, it's important life lessons, right? We trip over the carpet and we say, okay, here it is. I have to face this.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters who you are or what you do or how many degrees you have or whatever. Life happens. And we're here to live it, not get rid of it, change it, alter it, or, opt out. We're here, and it's, whatever's going on somehow is part of our journey in serving us in some way. We may not know for many years, but how many times have you looked back and gone, oh, that thing happened, but look where it took me?
Oh, Barbara, in my life, I'll tell you, I have been one of those type A personalities. I'm doing this, I'm planning this. And when MS hit, no more type A personality. But, my body changes in a heartbeat, and I have to cope with it, and I have to find a way. But it's so interesting to me because I plan something, I'm going down the street. Oh, but every time that happens, this is actually better for me than what I'd been planning for. I just, and so you just go, hey, I'm just going with it. It's just, what a ride. What a ride. Honestly, what's happening to me in my life right now with all the things I'm doing at work and the projects I'm doing, just like I never saw any of it coming, not any of it. So it's just thrilling, and I couldn't have planned for any of it. I really couldn't have. So yeah, it's just because I said yes. I told you last time, just because I said yes, and I was living that year of yes. I said yes, and all these things happen. But yeah,
that's a good answer. Yes.
Here. You're yesing here. You're here. You came back because you said yes.
Yes.
Bounce back. How do you bounce back from an exacerbation, from things in life that happen that steer you in a different direction than may ultimately be your choice, not your choice?
Well, there's a question.
You're welcome.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. I don't, again, know the how so much as I'll say this. I know I've told you before that when I have a new symptom, I wallow. I give myself 24 hours to wallow in self-pity, and I do. And when it's over, it's like, okay, Laura, that's it. You're done with the wallowing, and now what? And so one of the things, anything that happens to you with MS can be permanent. Anything can. And although I have amazing recovery, I do have long-term damage in various body parts and part of my body. And I just focus on, okay, what's the good? Like, for example, I written before about, and I don't think I've shared it with you, I think, Mark, but I haven't shared it here. But I've written about this idea that, if I can't see, I've said to myself, well, what is it that I'm not seeing? And what am I seeing that I shouldn't? And then when I wasn't walking, what steps have I taken that I should be taking? And what steps have I not been taking? And, if I can't speak, what words should I have been saying and what should I not have been saying? And I find myself doing that. And so when I can reflect on those things, first of all, that's a way to start. And as my body starts to heal again, I celebrate, okay, now I can do this. Now I can do this. Like, I'll be honest. When my speech first went the first time, I was blah, 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 trying to make my mouth because yesterday I could talk, an hour ago I could talk. I can't talk now. And I kept thinking, come on, Laura, yes, you can. And I gave myself a hard time. And similarly, when I couldn't walk, put your foot in front of another. You could do it yesterday. You could do it an hour ago. What's the matter with you? And I beat myself up about it until, I did that thing about 24 hours and let myself feel it. And then, I do find that bouncing back isn't, look, oh my God, now I can do this today. Hurrah. And so not what I was expecting to talk about today, but this year, it turns out I have something to do with my heart and MS. And I thought I never in my wildest imagination thought that my heart would be affected by MS. I don't know why, because it affects everything.
Yeah.
And so I had some time this summer where I grieved this change in my body, and I had to go through, oh my God, what does this mean? Can I live alone? How does this look? Can I feel safe here? What do I do? And I realized, yeah, I can. I just, it took some time to, as you said, bounce back, to find it in myself to say, wait a minute, I can do this. And there's things I can do. There's backup plans. My dear friend Marg, we have a backup plan that I'll, call her and she'll be right here if something goes wrong. And particularly if I lose my power, my hydro, because what will I do if I can't call 911? And so, it's just, there's things, just having backup plans. And so how do you bounce back? Think of ways that I start with little things, though. I think maybe that's the key. For me, it used to be overwhelming. If I wanted to, how am I ever going to do this? It just seemed too much. And so what I would start to do is little things. And so, for example, I got Alexa in my house. And so I can ask her to call, and I made sure that she's everywhere in the house, rather than wear an alert around my neck. Because if I'm in the shower, I wouldn't be wearing it then. And I'm most likely to slip in the shower, I'm guessing. So slippery little soap, whatever. So I made sure that Alexa can hear me if I'm in the shower. And, I feel really safe then, having this ability to have that. And, there's various other things, and you just start to implement things. What do I do if? So one of the things that's happening is my blood pressure suddenly plummets and getting really lightheaded, and I've passed out. And so, hit my head, and it was all good. But I asked, teach me how to fall, to not an osteopath, to a OT.
Yes.
And so she said, and this is good for everybody to know, drop to your knees. As I thought, if I fall on my butt, and I'm not that tall, but I'm tall enough that if I fell on my butt, I would jam my spine and probably fall backwards. Although I have breasts, maybe I would fall forward. But I just thought, but when she said drop to your knees, I was like, huh. So when I had another episode this summer and I dropped to my knees, immediately it was better, because I could then crawl. And so I didn't hurt myself falling on my knees, but it was, I heard it in my head, drop to your knees, because I was starting to faint. I was starting to go to black out. And so when I dropped to my knees, that was a bit better. And so anyway, long story short, you just learn to do things. So how do you bounce back? I think what you do is you little by little, maybe like not to try to overwhelm yourself by what do I have to do? Oh my God, but to make it in small bite-sized things. And so thing by thing, I'm like, okay, this is bugging me. How am I going to handle this? And actually, another thing I used to do, and this might be helpful to anyone who's listening, is I used to have a chart, and I had an A and a B and a C column. And my A column was, this is the thing that is upsetting me. This is the thing that I'm struggling with. And my B column was, what are symptoms that I start to see that come before the big giant MS attack, which is my C column? And so what sort of stressors therefore, because MS is often triggered by stress, and that includes getting a cold, the stress on your body, immune system. And so that's what I started doing these. And so I started recognizing really quickly, this A thing is happening. Okay, so I'm feeling B. Whoops. What do I need to stop before I get to C? And actually, it was such a simple chart, and it's become part of what I do actually to bounce back. Is I just become, oh wait, that could trigger, and especially now with my heart, for example, I know what I shouldn't do, and so I'm not doing it now. I know. Whereas the day in the summer that I had an episode, I didn't know all the things I had done was quite honestly together a hot mess. I should never have done any of them. And so now I know, and I'm just more careful. So in answer to the question, how do you bounce back? I think it's small, bite-sized things you can manage, and you do it slowly until you suddenly go, oh, actually, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm better than good. I'm great. And so, as much as all these things are going on, I'm good. I've recovered enough to feel this isn't beating me either. I mean, maybe someday it will, but it's not beating me now. So, does that answer your question, my dear?
I think it's more of a conversation as opposed to, that it's a question that can be answered, it's
fair enough.
More, do you understand what I'm saying? And more of a dialogue I was thinking about something you said earlier about labeling something, and I'm somebody that is pretty much take charge person. Don't tell me I can't do something. Like I just, flew to BC to see my daughter. I had a number of people saying, you can't do that on your own. Like, providing me with limitations. I mean, I've had some medical stuff and people were concerned about me and whatever. And I did it. However, and I had a conversation with my daughter about this. She sent me a recipe for buttery buns. I've had the recipe from her for a few months now. She gave me a hard copy. And I've got this block. I bake, I cook, whatever, but I have this block on making these muffins that is really simple. So I've labeled something in here that has paralyzed me from moving forward to making these buttery buns. But yet I could fly to BC and back on my own. So our minds, my point is, I guess for me, it is my mind that is keeping me from doing X. And I think our minds are pretty darn powerful. Mm-hmm.
Sure, they are. And we're just going to go to a commercial break on that note, but we will be right back. You're watching Out of My Mouth here on the New Thought Media Network, and our special guest, Dr. Laura Quirk. And we'll be back in just a minute. Don't go away.
Thanks, Brian.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And we're back, and I think you need to make those buns.
Yeah, I will. I will for sure. I was made Yorkshire pudding, gluten-free Yorkshire pudding by my son-in-law when I was there. They were so good. They were so good. And I felt so spoiled. I love the new visual and messages that Robert has created, I believe, during the interlude.
Yes,
Laura,
yes.
I'm going to poke a little bear here.
Oh.
And I'm going to say you're so strong. You're so strong. And if you would read your beautiful poem at this time, I would be so grateful if you're comfortable doing so. And I think it will inspire further conversation.
Awesome.
Sure. This is
Thank
not
you.
something I typically share, but I will, and I'm happy to do so. So the background is people always said you're so strong. So this is what I wrote. You have called me strong, a rock that you can depend on. And yes, I am strong. But please do not see that single side of me. I am not always strong. And I have worked very hard to feel, to show, to be more than just my strength. I can be weak, vulnerable, sad. I contain wells of grief, sadness, anguish, pain. If it were not for these, I would not feel the strength. This all came from my being tired of pretending, wishing that I was truly strong, when all along I felt I was something else. It is only now, after a lot of hard work, after overcoming the things I thought I couldn't, that my strength is truly born of allowing myself to feel the opposite. I have learned that I don't want to forget the past. I want to be okay with remembering. So while you're honoring my strength, please do not deny the other sides of me. I am not always the strong one, the sturdy one, or even the rock. What I am is someone who can now embrace it all. Yes, a rock. Yes, vulnerable. Yes, weak. Yes, grieving. Yes, aching. Yes, living. All of it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing
Thanks for
your
asking.
inner self with us.
Thanks for asking.
And it's such a great poem, because ultimately all of us are all of that, whether we want to admit it or not. You admit it, which I love. I love that. And I love the giving yourself 24 hours to, whine and snivel about whatever. And then, okay, now what? That to me is beautiful, because it's clearly a choice, but at the same time, you're absolutely honoring where you are.
That's it. Absolutely it. I totally believe in that. That if we try to ignore it, like I said, trip over that darn carpet. And also if I don't let myself, it comes back to hurt in ways that I just don't even want to say. And so, I mean, not that I can't, but it's just, I know that when I've listened to my gut, when I've followed what I need to do and just really not deny it and feel it, but then say, enough already, Laura. You're done with that. You don't need to be feeling sorry for yourself anymore. And it's not that it's not a bad situation and that I can't go, gee, this is rotten, because it is. But maybe there's just not maybe there is other ways to handle it beyond that. So yeah, I think that's how I bounce back. But yes, this is the whole thing. People have my whole life said you're so strong. And I used to think, yeah, not so much. But I didn't understand what it was that was missing. And it was just that whole thing. You have to have dark and you have to have light to understand. And I had to let myself feel, and it was hard to let myself feel vulnerable because I'd always been strong. So that was my thing, and so don't let me show vulnerability. But now I can. So yeah, it's been.
Which shows your true power.
Well, I think so. I mean, I don't really think I'm trying to be powerful in the sense of overpowering anyone else, but certainly power in my own self. Absolutely.
In your own self, yeah, because that's the only real power.
Well, I think
Everything else is a manipulation.
right. I think so too. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm not interested in being powerful over someone else.
No, that'll come
And
back and bite you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes strength to be vulnerable.
It does.
It does. Really does. This is the whole point, right? To be able to be both strong and vulnerable, we have both sides of that. And to be truly both, you have to feel both. And I think, I'm really say happy. I'm not happy that I've been to all the things I have, but I am grateful for the lessons that I've learned to get me to this place that I am not afraid of the past, and I can face it. I mean, one of the things I talk about in my open education resource called Why Normal Sucks. No, not Why Normal Sucks, is When Hope Is All You've Got Left, is what I'm talking about. It was really hard to face the past. It was really hard to look at my mother, to look at the story, to think, could I be like her? Oh my God. And, this was my deepest, darkest secret. I remember I went to a party once and someone said to me, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, you talk about your mother 0. Why is that? And I was like, we're at a party. And I said, if you really want to know, ask me another time. But I was hoping they never would, and they never did, because I just didn't know how to talk about her. I just didn't. And so it's been really quite like when friends read my When Hope Is All You Have Left chapter, they many of them have known me a long time, said, I didn't know any of that about you. I mean, and it was really interesting. I just didn't talk about her. So it's been quite a journey to be able to be vulnerable and talk about her. And so, yeah, I'm again resilient, right? You find a way to say, you know what, it's okay now. Actually, there was the most beautiful, if I could find it, I would love to share this. That I just 1 second, please. I know exactly where it is. I would like to share something that made me decide to actually do the Hope Project in the first place. I'm just going to what I just did. If I can read it to you, I'd really like to. Do you mind?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And you probably are very familiar with Henry Nouwen, and maybe you're not, but what he said was this: there are 2 ways of telling your story. One is to tell it compulsively and urgently. Keep returning to it because you see your present suffering as a result of your past experience. But there's another way. You can tell your story from the place where it no longer dominates you. You can speak about it with a certain distance and see it as a way to your present freedom.
Ooh,
and
nice.
I know, isn't that gorgeous? And that's how I felt about the whole project. It was just whenever I started to work on it, it was like, it's too hard. I couldn't do it. And then slowly but surely, it was like, no, it's less awful. And then one day it was like not awful anymore. And it's how I saw it, to my present freedom. I have a level of freedom that I have not had before. So the publishing of the Hope Project and saying to everyone in the world, go ahead and read it. At the same time, it's like, okay. I mean, my poem I just read you. Okay. What have I got to hide? Nothing. And I'm not ashamed of it. I just didn't talk about it. And so anyway, it's funny how that goes in life. Anyway.
And once again, because of the Hope Project, because you shared it with me, then you shared it with your class, you're here talking, sharing your story, providing education, I believe anyway, in a different format, different venue.
Well, it certainly is. Yeah, it certainly. I've never taught classes before in which I've not had reading to do. But in my Why Normal Sucks, I've got reading they can do, but I have no required reading. It's all about people's lived experiences. And that's what we're talking about week after week. And my students are just lapping it up. They keep saying to me, oh my God, Laura, I've learned so much more from this, just talking about people's experiences and putting them in breakout rooms and asking them, what do you think? And asking them to write reflections and tell me what they think. And they've never done that before, and they feel heard. And
Mm.
I mean, the stuff they tell me, it's blowing my mind again. It's blowing my mind. But yes, it's because I was willing with the Hope Project to share my vulnerability that they, I believe, can be vulnerable with me.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're very compassionate to other people as well, Laura. I've experienced your compassion. I'm going to be speaking at one of Laura's classes, and a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't feeling very well, and Laura said, "Mark, you can cancel last minute. I'm fine with that." And she said yes to me saying no, and gave me the courage to being able to say no and not putting myself in a position where I would be perhaps causing more discomfort for myself. So Laura shows compassion to others as well.
But it was a teachable moment as well to say to my students, our guest wasn't able to come today. And so this is what we're doing instead. Let's talk about these things. And, that was totally fine. It's just because we're talking about disability. Now, I didn't specifically say, Mark, this was a disability issue. It's simply that we have to be flexible and understand that people have different ways of being in the world all the time, every day. And so it was actually fine, absolutely fine, more than fine, if that's what you needed. And I'm glad that you did what you needed to do there. And as it turns out that day, what a day! I have a student who has a uncle, and he is 54, and he's in a wheelchair, and they thought he had any number of things. It turns out that they thought that he had all these years, and they told him at one time he had Down syndrome, which he didn't, and they told him he had cerebral palsy, which he didn't, and anyway, but he has the mental capacity of about a 12-year-old person, which is no problem. So she asked me, could she bring him to my class? She's not in my class, but had been in a different class. And she said, Laura, would you mind if I just brought him for something to do? I think he'd really like that. And I said, sure. So what happened the night that you were not available to come, Mark, he came to the class. And what's interesting is his speech is, well, I understood it. I think if you just listen, you understood it. But he has trouble in public. And so he had this young woman interpret. So she said, oh, he just said this. And there were students in the class, and I could tell he was really slow, and they were, but the class was entirely patient with his slow voice. And they were all fascinated by what he had to say and his experiences. So it turned out to be a totally lovely experience, Marg, for all other reasons than I expected it to have been. And my students were so compassionate and so beautiful and so willing to just be patient and listen to him. And one of the things my students said to me last week was, what's so incredible about my class is that I listen, that I'm really, if someone tells me their story, I don't hurry them up. I don't tell them, sorry, we don't have time. I just listen, and, I might ask questions, but I listen. And then people might ask questions from the class as well. But point being that was actually beautiful and unexpected. And I couldn't have planned for that if I'd wanted to. And, it was good. It was just different than what I thought it was going to be. So
there's a flexibility that also comes with resilience.
There is.
Yeah.
There must
be. And openness.
Openness, yeah.
Openness, yeah. Like an example that I've used before in the sharing wisdom is a butterfly. How many butterflies do you see? And people look at me like I have 3 heads because, it's in the dead of the winter. Mark, how am I going to see a butterfly? But once you start looking, you'll see it on a book cover. You'll see it in a tattoo or whatever. So what you saw, Laura, what I'm hearing anyway, is your class, a student came in, a young student, not your particular student, but a student came in and taught your class in a different way because you were open. You saw the opportunity.
Well, it was a beautiful opportunity. And, I have somebody who's written a chapter for the Hope Project, actually, and I am just in the process of editing, and I'm so excited. And when I talked to this person, she's an administrative person at the college. She said, "Boy, I'd love to take your class." I said, "Well, come." You can join us. And she's been coming every week. And it's like, why not? Why? And this student's uncle and her, like, why not? Sure. There's no reason not to have you join us. There's no reason I can think of. And it's not, we can have people audit the class and you don't pay for that. So why not? Sure. And I'm not breaking any rules, but also sure. So, it's been an interest, and she's lovely. She's been really a wonderful addition. So yeah, this is just, just pinch me. No, it's okay. I'll pinch myself. But I am just so excited that the world is giving me so many beautiful things. And yes, so Mark, I'm so glad you said you couldn't come to my class when you needed to not come. And at the same time, it was beautiful the way it turned out. So I kind of always think things just turn out like I've learned that. I mean, not that things aren't hard. They don't always turn out the way you think, but they still
turn out.
If nothing else, I think to myself, well, I'm stronger for it. Even if it was horrible, at least I'm stronger for it. At least this is a good thing, actually, and I can learn from it. So even, again, that's the resilience piece, isn't it? You decide to make choices. Yeah.
I love that.
And I'll just say thank you to Barbara as well, because I was also not available to do the show that same day, and for the same reason. So you flew solo that day, did you not?
I did. I just took a breath and went with it. And I had no idea who the guest was. And but yeah, we had a blast. Jen was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, because Cheryl was on vacation and we weren't well. I think that's, the wonderful thing about the three of us is that if somebody needs the day off, like Cheryl's in a meeting today,
so ask her.
we can do that easily and still create a great show. So yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, you got to take care of you.
Yeah.
My theme is, if you don't do you, you will not get done. So do you.
Oh, I love it.
Well, I always say to people that, it's not nearly as beautiful as what you just said, but I always say that we have emotional piggy banks. And if we don't put things into our emotional piggy bank, we have nothing to give. And if what you want to do is give to people, then you need to put things into your emotional piggy bank. And so, and when I'm depleted, I've got nothing in my emotional piggy bank. I need to find a way to put things back. So again, part of resilience, isn't it? Where we're finding ways to put back into our piggy banks. And although I'm not into, money, I think it's a good analogy nonetheless, that we can look at it and say, right, what do I need for me in order to be able to help you? So yeah, that's absolutely.
I think people forget that sometimes. Like, we have to be full in order to share. So self-care is a really important thing to do. Like, we got to look after ourselves.
It's not only important, it's critical. I am somebody who, I love my job. I know I love my job. I can't believe I have this job. And I also know that I need solitude and quiet in order to balance what I'm doing when I'm talking and giving and sharing. And I'm sure I get more out of class than my students do. I constantly go, wow, I'm so high as a kite when I'm finished class. But at the same time, I need that. I need that balance. I need to find that place where I can say, okay. And if I don't, I pay. We talk about paying for things. I pay physically, I pay emotionally, I pay mentally, if I don't listen to what I need. And sometimes Laura Quirk, you don't need to do that. I'll say that to myself. And then I pay. And so I really do need to find that balance. And so interestingly enough, in the summer, it was such a hot summer, and I thought I was going to be outside gardening all the time. And it was too hot. And when I realized I had to be inside, I thought, what am I going to do? I had 9 weeks paid holiday. I'm a spoiled brat. And I thought, what am I going to do for 9 weeks paid holiday indoor in the summer? Yikes. What am I going to do? Now, I did get to spend time with my dear friend Mark sometimes, but a lot of time I spent it alone. And what I realized, again, I didn't know I needed it, but I needed the solitude. I needed the time for self-reflection to come to terms with this thing that was going on with my heart and to figure out what do I need here and what do I want? And I had to grieve it and I had to feel it. And so funnily enough, what I didn't know I needed, I got. So it's another example that we were talking about it earlier, Barbara, and it's just like, I didn't know I needed this, but I needed it. And I came out of it feeling relaxed and healthy. And I'm giggling to myself because I keep saying to my doctor when I see her, actually, I know I have all these things wrong with me, but I feel really healthy. I feel great.
That's because you have a very healthy attitude.
Well, or something. I don't think that I am being blind. I think I know what's going on. I'm just deciding to be okay with it and to understand that it just is, as we've said earlier.
It is what it is, and you're rolling with it.
That's what it is.
So beautiful.
Yeah, resilience.
So beautiful. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I do too.
Laura, I don't. No, go ahead.
No, you finish. Go ahead, dear.
I was just going to talk about the heat, and my guess is that a lot of in the audience don't know about heat and MS.
Well, multiple sclerosis is a challenging disease for lots of reasons. And back before they had MRIs, they used to put someone in a hot tub, and if you literally wilted, they decided you had MS. And there is no doubt about it. If I get too hot, I mean, I could explain some of the reason, and I will in a second. But essentially, if I get too hot, I get really weak. And what that means sometimes is it brings on MS attacks, or at very least, it brings in old damage and resurfaces. And so I can be very, very weak. And so what is that? Well, MS attacks the myelin sheath that surrounds the nerve. And the myelin sheath is what conducts the messages from the brain to the body. And I describe it this way. I say that MS is like a pair of scissors. And well, first of all, the myelin sheath is like a sleeping bag that's around the nerves. Makes a cushion little thing around the nerve. And then MS comes in with a piece of scissors and cuts up the sleeping bag. And so the messages, of course, if it's all cut up, the messages don't get through from the mind or the brain to the body in quite the same way. Sometimes it's completely cut and it's done permanently. Sometimes what happens is the body remyelinates. And so imagine you've got, this sleeping bag that's got all these places that it's sewed up. And so it's good, but just not quite as good as it used to be. And sometimes there's patches that make it a little bit more difficult for the messages to get through. And so what happens when you overheat is those places that are damaged in the myelin, simply it's called nerve fiber fatigue, and it literally just you can't walk, wherever there's damage previously, it shows up. And so this can cause attacks, but it also can be like, I've known of people and I've known myself where literally you're paralyzed until you cool down, until you get, you can't move. And even if you're not paralyzed, if that's not the issue, I'm not exactly paralyzed with my left leg, but let's just say what happens is I feel like I weigh 400 pounds and I can't carry myself. I'm so heavy. And I'm not saying anything about someone who weighs 400 pounds. It's just that it's how I imagine that would feel. Or even a better example, I say it feels like I'm trying to walk through what I imagine it would be like to walk through molasses, because I'm just trying to push through something that's a little bit liquid and fluid, but at the same time, just really resistant. And I struggle. And so that's what happens, Marg, when I get overheated, is I simply get sick. And so the government recognizes this enough that it's a tax write-off that I have air conditioning in my house and air conditioning in my car. They realize that's so consistent with MS that they recognize that. And so if the government frankly recognizes that, then I say that's a big win. So, but anyhow, yeah. So I don't do well in heat, and especially humidity. And I just wilt in humidity. I feel awful. And so my house is always cold. Poor Marg, when she comes over, she's bundled up. And at least people know that about me. If they're coming to my house, it's probably going to be cool. If I'm in a t-shirt, you need sweaters. But at the same time, I just don't have an option to not. And so I couldn't go out. The day that I went outside to do the work and I had the issue with my heart in the summer, it was really, really humid. It was 6 a.m. I hadn't had breakfast. I thought, well, it's okay. I'm just going to do this mulching because some friends had helped me with some weeding, and I better mulch while there's, the going's good. And I'll do it at 6 a.m. while it's still cool, but it wasn't, and it was humid. And anyway, I paid for it. And so I learned I'm not going to do that again. But at the same time, it just is okay. Now I know.
That's the thing, right? Is we learn something and hopefully we remember it in the future.
Well, if we don't, I promise our bodies or something will remind us. So,
We will get a reminder.
Yeah,
And it might be painful. Well, we're down to our last 4 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Time flies, I'll tell you. So just to close with, what is one thing that you would like people to take away from this conversation today? What would be the most important thing?
You know what? I wrote something, and I just want to read it because I think this is what I want to say about resilience.
Yeah.
And I wrote this because I was thinking about resilience. And I said, the secret of resilience is this. Life is not about productivity. It's about process. Struggle, forgive, take risks, succeed and fail, feel remorse, feel gratitude, mourn, love, and celebrate. In other words, let the uncertainties of life become woven into the fabric of your being alongside the joys and the triumphs. So resilience is about the process. That's what I'll say.
I love that. I love that. Woo. Marg, what about you? How do you follow that?
I know, I know. I think for me, strength is in vulnerability.
That is awesome as well. Oh, I love that. This has been a great day. I've learned so much. I actually took a couple of notes while I was listening in. I think too that the idea that we have within us resilience and that we can tap into it, but it does require us to be, responsible for our actions, responsible for our choices, because we have to choose to do something different or in a new way. So I think that for me is kind of part of it as well. And then it is what it is. And the truth is we cannot change what is because it already has been created. And the other thing I like to remind people of, life is an adventure and it doesn't have a destination. We're just here to live, and we'll be here as long as we're here. And then we'll be wherever. Who knows what's next? But we know what's happening here. Laura, you are a true gift. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Mark, what do you think?
Thank you, my friend.
Wow.
Pardon me?
I was just saying, what do you think?
I think I'll keep her.
Want to loan her out a little bit? I'll come visit you and visit Laura at the same time.
Sounds good.
That sounds good.
That would be awesome. All right. Well, you've been watching Out of My Mouth here on the New Thought Media Network with our remarkable guest, Dr. Laura Quirk, and of course, my beloved co-host, Mark Dupuy. And we are so grateful you took the time to watch. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And, if you feel up to it, you can always donate to the New Thought Media Network. We are a charitable organization, and we absolutely want to keep on rolling. So look forward to seeing you next time, and bye for now.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.